My name is Lauren Mitchell. I am 34, and last Sunday my sister showed me exactly how far she'd go, just because I told her no. We were in my parents' backyard in Phoenix, the grill still smoking, everyone half distracted by food and small talk, when she walked over to the patio table, picked up my open laptop with one hand, and gave me this lazy little smirk. "You really won't lend me 10 grand?" she asked, like it was the most normal request in the world. I didn't even have time to answer again before she turned toward the pool, swung her arm back, and let it fly. The splash was louder than anyone's reaction. My entire business, all my client campaigns, months of work, disappeared under chlorinated water while my sister laughed and said, "Oops, guess that's what happens when you don't help family." I waited for someone to shout at her, to ask if she'd lost her mind. Instead, my dad just shrugged, looked at me, and said, "Well, that's the price you pay for shutting out your own sister." No one asked if I was okay. No one asked about the laptop that pays all my bills. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't give them the scene they were expecting. I just stepped to the edge, reached into the cold water, and pulled my laptop out, watching the screen flicker once and die in my hands. I set it down on the concrete, water dripping off the keys like it was bleeding out, and I smiled in a way that scared even me. I didn't argue. I just dried my hands, grabbed my car keys, and left without saying goodbye. That night, alone in my townhouse, I made a few quiet decisions. At 6 a.m. the next morning, when my phone wouldn't stop lighting up with my sister's name, that was the moment I knew she finally understood what it really means to lose something. Have you ever had your own family throw your hard work and career away, and then somehow make you feel like it was all your fault? Stay until the end of this story, and you'll see exactly what the true price of betrayal in a family looks like. Growing up, I was always the kid who did everything right. I stayed out of trouble, got the good grades, went to Arizona State for marketing, and built a career that actually paid the bills. By 29, I had left my agency job, started my own digital marketing business, and was making more than I ever had in my life. I bought a small townhouse in Phoenix, paid off my student loans, and for the first time, I felt like my life was actually mine. My sister Bree was the opposite. She's 2 years older than me, and if you ask my parents, she's the creative one. She dropped out of community college after a year, bounced from bartending to waitressing to helping a friend with a clothing brand, and then decided she was going to be a full-time handmade jewelry artist and influencer. In reality, that meant she lived in my parents' house or in the little condo my dad transferred into my name for tax reasons. And she always seemed to need just a little more help to get things off the ground. When I started making real money, it was like a switch flipped in my family. Suddenly, I wasn't just Lauren, I was the safety net. It started small, like when my mom said, "Your sister's phone got shut off again. Can you just add her to your plan? It'll be easier if it's all under your name." So I did. Then my Aunt Linda's line got added too, because the family plan was cheaper if there were more people. Of course, I was the one paying the whole bill every month. Then came subscriptions. Bree needed Netflix, just for background noise while she made bracelets. She needed my Amazon Prime to ship supplies faster. She needed my Canva Pro and a few other tools because it all comes back around, Lore, when my shop blows up. I gave her my logins, told myself it wasn't a big deal, and went back to work. The bigger stuff came later. When Bree wanted a car she couldn't get approved on her own, so Dad called me. He framed it like a chance to invest in your sister's future. He asked me to co-sign on a loan for a used Jeep Cherokee so she could drive to markets and pop-up events without borrowing their car. I hesitated, but he laid it on thick. "You're doing so well, honey. Bree just needs a little boost." I ended up not just co-signing but also covering most of the payments when Bree hit slow months and couldn't make it. Then, there was the condo in Tempe. On paper, it's mine. My parents transferred it to my name to get a tax break and, because, in my dad's words, you're the responsible one. Bree moved in temporarily until she got on her feet. 3 years later, she was still there, not paying rent, not paying utilities, treating it like some kind of artist's loft while I dealt with property taxes and repairs. And on top of that, there were the loans that were never really loans. $4,000 here for inventory, $2,000 there for a camera to film product videos, a couple hundred for vendor fees, table fees, branding courses, you name it. Every time, it came with the same promise: I'll pay you back as soon as I start making real money. She never did. And every time I tried to pull back, my parents would say things like, "She's just not like you, Lauren. You understand money? She doesn't. Family helps family." So when my sister threw my laptop into the pool, it wasn't just about a ruined machine. It was years of me quietly covering for her. Years of being told I was selfish any time I even thought about saying no. That splash was the sound of me finally waking up. Because once you realize the people you love see you as a wallet first and a person second, how do you ever go back to normal after that? That night, after I left my parents' house, I drove home in complete silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of my own breathing and the faint hum of the highway. I walked into my townhouse, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and set the dead, waterlogged laptop on the kitchen counter like a body. For a few minutes, I just stared at it. If I let myself feel everything right then, I knew I'd either start screaming or completely shut down. So instead, I did the one thing I've always been good at. I opened my backup desktop, sat down at my desk, and treated my entire life like a client project. I pulled up a blank document and typed one line at the top: "What Bree gets because of me." Then I started listing. Phone plan, Bree, my parents, Aunt Linda, all under my name, all on my bill. Streaming accounts, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Spotify, all logged in on Bree's TV, her phone, her tablet. Amazon Prime, she uses it more than I do. Order history full of craft supplies and random impulse buys I barely noticed because I was too busy to scroll. Canva Pro, a few other paid tools for design and marketing that she borrowed to make logos and social posts for a business that never seemed to exist anywhere but her imagination. Then the big stuff, the Jeep. I dug into my email and pulled up the loan documents. My name, on every page, right next to hers. Every reminder notice from the bank. They'd come to me, and I had quietly paid the difference more times than I could count so her car wouldn't get repossessed. The condo in Tempe. Property tax statements with my name on them. Maintenance requests. The plumber invoice from when the sink backed up. In every way that mattered, it was my place. In every way that mattered to her, it was just Bree's condo that she happened to live in for free. The deeper I went, the more sick I felt. It wasn't just that I'd been generous. I had basically built an entire ecosystem around her. She had a car because of me, a place to live because of me, a phone because of me, entertainment because of me, tools for her business because of me. And in her mind, that still wasn't enough to earn a simple no. I scrolled through old texts from my parents, all the subtle guilt trips. "She's just not like you. You know how your sister is. Don't make her feel like a burden, Lore." But the truth was, she was a burden, and I'd been the one carrying her weight so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. At some point, the anger stopped feeling hot and loud and started to feel cold and clean. I picked up my phone and called the cell provider. I confirmed my identity, took a breath, and said, I want every line on this account canceled except mine, effective tonight. The rep hesitated, asked if I was sure, warned me that the other phones would lose service immediately. I said, "That's the idea." Next, I logged into my streaming accounts, went into settings, and signed out of all devices. New passwords, long and ugly, ones I wouldn't accidentally tell anyone. I removed her email from my Amazon household, killed the payment method she'd gotten way too comfortable using, and set up alerts for any new charges. Then I opened my email and searched for Andrew Cole, the attorney a friend from a networking group had once recommended for real estate and family messes. At the time, I'd saved the contact and thought, hopefully I'll never need this. Now I clicked his website, saw a free late-night consultation, and filled out the form with shaking hands. I wrote exactly what was happening, that my sister was living in a condo that was legally mine, that she didn't pay rent, that she'd destroyed my laptop after I refused to give her $10,000, that my parents were pressuring me to keep funding her life. 15 minutes later, he called. His voice was calm, practical, the kind of steady I needed. He asked for details about the condo, the loan, whether there was a lease. There wasn't. "Then she's not a tenant, she's a guest," he said. "Which means you absolutely can remove her. It just has to be documented properly. I'll draft a notice for you tonight. You'll email it, and we'll send a certified letter tomorrow. Don't argue with her. Don't negotiate. Just follow the process." When we hung up, I opened my document again and stared at the list. For the first time, I didn't see obligations. I saw exits. Every line item was a cord I could unplug. Every favor I'd been guilted into was something I could end with a phone call, a password reset, a signed piece of paper. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but weirdly clear. My sister thought throwing my laptop in a pool was punishment. She had no idea that all she really did was flip a switch in my head. And by the time the sun came up, the life she'd built on my back was about to start collapsing, one quiet decision at a time. I must have fallen asleep for an hour or two, because the next thing I remember is my alarm going off at 6 a.m., and my phone already buzzing in my hand. The screen was lit up with missed calls and messages. The same name over and over again. Bree. First it was regular calls, then FaceTime attempts, then a stream of texts coming through on Wi-Fi. Why is my phone not working? Lauren, did something happen to the plan? Answer me right now. I watched the notification stack and didn't open a single one. A few minutes later, my mom's name popped up, then my dad's. I let those ring out too. It was almost funny in a sick way. For years, I'd been the one terrified of letting them down. And now, the moment I stopped paying for everything, they were the ones panicking before sunrise. I made coffee, sat down at my desk, and pulled up the auto loan account. The balance, the payment history, the delinquency notices I'd quietly covered so the bank wouldn't take the Jeep. All of it stared back at me. My chest tightened, but not from guilt this time. It was anger, sharp and focused. I dialed the lender, went through the security questions, and when the rep asked how she could help, I said, "I'm a co-borrower on a vehicle that the other party is using without paying. I'd like to discuss repossession." There was a pause while she pulled up the file, then a more careful tone. She asked if the car was at my address. I told her no, that it was at a condo I owned in Tempe where my sister was living. I gave the address, confirmed again that my name was on the title, and listened as she explained the process. They could send a tow truck sometime that day, unannounced, as long as it was in a public or accessible parking area. I signed off on the authorization electronically while she was still on the line. Hanging up, I pictured Bree waking up late, shuffling outside in slippers, seeing an empty parking spot where her precious Jeep used to be. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel bad. I felt balanced. The texts kept coming. My phone is completely dead. I can't call anyone. What did you do? You better fix this. Then, did you cancel my line? Are you serious right now? I set my phone face down and opened my credit card account instead. If canceling the phone plan and going after the car were cutting off the obvious cords, this was digging up the roots. I went through my statements line by line, highlighting anything I couldn't immediately recognize. Little charges, mostly. $30 here, $70 there, random restaurant apps, boutique clothing sites I'd never heard of, a string of movie rentals I hadn't watched. At first glance, they looked like the kind of stuff you forget about. But put together over 6 months, the total was just over $2,000. I remembered the day Bree had grabbed my wallet on her way out the door. "I'll just use your card to grab Starbucks. My app is being weird," she'd said, laughing. She'd brought back a drink, some pastry I didn't ask for, and I never thought about it again. Somewhere in that coffee run, she'd memorized my numbers or snapped a photo. I called the card company, told them I believed a family member had been making unauthorized charges, and read off the list. The agent asked if I wanted to file it as fraud and have a new card issued. "Yes," I said, without hesitating. "And I want her removed as an authorized user if she's on there for any reason." We checked. She was. I had agreed to that once too, in the name of helping her build credit. We fixed that in under a minute. As the fraud claim was filed, more messages came in over Wi-Fi. Bree again. "Why is my card getting declined?" "My Uber app says payment failed." "You're actually insane, you know that?" Then my dad. "Call me, now!" I finished with the bank first. The agent told me the investigation could take some time, but that the charges would be provisionally reversed while they reviewed them. When we hung up, I finally opened my email. Sitting at the top of my inbox was a message from Andrew Cole with the subject line, "Notice to vacate, draft attached." I clicked it. The letter was short, formal, and painfully clear. It stated that Bree was occupying my property without a lease, that I was terminating her permission to stay, and that she had 30 days to vacate. It referenced the address, my ownership, and the remedies I could pursue if she refused. All I had to do was sign it and send it. I added my e-signature, took a breath, and forwarded it to Bree's email with a simple line, "Please see attached." No explanation, no apology. Then, per Andrew's instructions, I submitted the document to be sent by certified mail to the condo address. Somewhere between scheduling the mailing and closing my laptop, my phone started vibrating non-stop again. Bree's texts had shifted from confusion to rage. "You're kicking me out? You can't do this. That place is mine too. You are literally ruining my life over a stupid laptop." I set the phone down and looked at the list I'd made the night before. Most of the items now crossed out. Phone line, gone. Streaming and subscriptions, locked. Credit card access, cut. Jeep, on its way to a tow yard. Free housing, officially counting down. Outside, the sun was climbing, turning the sky that bright Arizona blue I usually loved. For once, it felt like it belonged to me. My sister thought she'd punished me when she threw my laptop into the pool. She had no idea that the real punishment was waking up to a world where I finally stopped pretending I owed her everything. And by the time the tow truck rolled up to that condo in Tempe, it was too late for her to pretend nothing had changed. It didn't take long for the fallout to show up at my front door. Around 10 that morning, just as I was starting to answer emails from clients and pretend I had a normal life, someone started pounding on the townhouse door so hard the frames rattled. I didn't even need to look to know who it was. "Open the damn door, Lauren." Bree's voice sliced right through the wood. "What did you do to my car?" My heart jumped, but my hands were steady. Instead of going to the door, I picked up my phone, opened the camera, and started recording as I walked to the entryway. I didn't open it. I just looked through the peephole and watched her pacing on my front step like a caged animal. Her hair was thrown up in a messy knot. She was still in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, and she had that wild look she got any time she thought she was losing control. "They took it!" she yelled, kicking the bottom of the door. "Some tow truck just showed up and took my Jeep. My Jeep, Lauren!" She slapped the door with the flat of her hand. "I know you did this. You and your stupid money and your stupid power trips. Open this door and fix it." I cleared my throat and raised my voice just enough so she could hear me through the wood. "It's not your Jeep, Bree. It's the bank's. And my name is on that loan. Remember?" There was a beat of silence. Then she laughed, sharp and mean. "Oh, so that's how it is? You cancel my phone, you cut off my card, you get my car taken, and now you're what? Evicting me?" She thumped the door again. "You're doing all of this over a laptop. A laptop, Lauren." I didn't answer. She went from yelling to screaming, cycling through insults, calling me heartless, crazy, a control freak who always needed to feel superior. At one point, she screamed, "You think you're better than everyone just because you know how to pay bills?" That one almost made me laugh. Almost. What I actually did was hit the side button on my phone and dial 911 with the recording still going. I stepped back from the door as I spoke quietly to the dispatcher, told her my sister was outside, that she was banging on the door and refusing to leave, that there had already been property damage in the last 24 hours. They told me to stay inside, keep the door locked, and wait for officers to arrive. When the squad car pulled up, I watched from the front window as a female officer stepped out and went straight to Bree. There was a lot of gesturing, some pointing at my house. Bree's voice raised even louder about family and betrayal and overreacting. A few minutes later, Officer Hayes knocked on my door, and this time I opened it. She looked tired but kind, the kind of tired that says she's seen this exact situation more times than she can count. I showed her the video, the texts, explained what had happened with the laptop and the money. She listened, nodding slowly. "Legally," she said when I finished, "you've done everything right. She doesn't have any right to be here if you tell her to leave. If she comes back and does this again, you might want to consider a restraining order. I know she's family, but that doesn't put her above the law." Behind her, Bree was standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, face flushed with fury and humiliation. When the officer told her she had to go, that she couldn't come banging on my door again, Bree shouted past her, "You're ruining my life, Lauren. You're actually ruining my life over some stupid electronics." I didn't step onto the porch. I just looked at her and said, very calmly, "No, I'm just done funding it." After the police car pulled away, my phone lit up again, this time with my dad's name. I answered, more out of curiosity than anything. He didn't even say hello. "What on earth are you thinking?" he snapped. "Your sister is hysterical. You took her car, her phone, her place to live, over one bad decision?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Dad, it's not one bad decision. She's been using my credit card without permission for months. Over $2,000. She hasn't paid for that car in almost a year. She's been living in my condo for free for 3 years. And she destroyed my laptop because I wouldn't hand her $10,000 more." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear him breathing. "She told us you were exaggerating," he finally said. "She said you offered, then changed your mind, and now you're punishing her." I actually laughed, a short, humorless sound. Of course she did. I told him about the fraud claim, the bank statements, the eviction notice from the attorney. I laid it all out plainly. No sugarcoating, no apologizing. On the other end, I could hear my mom quietly crying, like she was standing right next to him with the phone on speaker. "Lauren, honey," she whispered, "she's your sister. She made a mistake. She doesn't understand money the way you do. You know how she is." "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. I know exactly how she is, and you do too. You just don't want to admit it. Mom tried to pivot to guilt. She says she's going to be on the street. She says you're throwing her away. Is that really what you want? I closed my eyes, took a breath. I want her to be responsible for herself. For once. I'm not throwing her away. I'm just not cushioning the landing anymore. After I hung up, Aunt Linda started texting. Long paragraphs about how money comes and goes, but sisters are forever. How I was letting success change me. How I should remember who shared a bedroom with me when we were kids. A few hours later, Bree made a public post on Facebook about greedy family members who steal cars and homes and weaponize money. Mutual friends started chiming in, some blindly defending her, some messaging me privately to ask if everything was okay. I didn't jump into the comments. I didn't write a big call-out thread with screenshots and proof, even though I easily could have. I reported the post for harassment, blocked a couple of the loudest idiots, and went back to my work. Because here's what I finally understood. Anyone who wanted to see me as the villain was going to do it no matter how many facts I handed them. The people who actually knew me didn't need a slideshow to get the picture. That afternoon, sitting at my desk with my phone face down and my email open, I realized something else too. For the first time in my life, the loudest, most dramatic person in the family wasn't writing the story. I was. And as messy and painful as that day was, part of me was almost relieved. Because once you let go of being the good daughter whose job is to keep everyone comfortable, there's a strange, terrifying freedom in finally letting people be uncomfortable with the truth. 18 months later, the email from the court showed up like any other notification. It was short and dry. Just a note that Bree had successfully completed her probation. Her community service hours were logged. Her payments were up to date. Legally, the whole mess was closed. Emotionally, not so much. By then, my life looked very different from the day she threw my laptop in the pool. I had a new MacBook, obviously. I'd upgraded my systems, backed everything up in 3 different places, and tightened my client contracts. My business had grown, not in a flashy overnight success way, but in steady, solid numbers. I had more referrals, better boundaries, and a level of focus I hadn't known I was missing when half my mental energy was going to putting out Bree-shaped fires. I'd also built something I never thought I'd have with my parents: honest distance. I saw my mom for coffee once every month or two, just the two of us. Sometimes we talked about light things, like her garden or whatever book club she'd joined. Sometimes the conversations cut deeper. She admitted, one shaky afternoon over iced tea, that watching Bree in an orange vest picking up trash had broken something in her. Not because she didn't deserve consequences, Mom said quietly, but because I realized how many times we shielded her from them and how many times we pushed them onto you instead. My dad came around slower, like a big ship trying to turn in a narrow canal. He never gave me a dramatic apology, but he stopped asking me to fix things. When I told him I wasn't coming to big family holidays yet, he just nodded and said, "I understand," instead of guilt-tripping me. It was new. It was fragile, but it was real. As for Bree, she became more of a rumor than a presence. I heard she'd moved back in with my parents for a while, then into a small apartment with a roommate. I heard she was working retail, clocking in and out like everybody else. I heard she'd stopped telling people she was about to blow up, and started saying things like, "I'm just trying to keep my head above water." I didn't stalk her social media. I didn't ask for updates. When her name came up, I let other people talk and kept my face neutral. I'd made my choices. She was living with hers. The first time I actually saw her again, it wasn't at some dramatic family summit. It was in the most ordinary place possible, a grocery store. I was pushing a cart down the frozen foods aisle, trying to decide between 2 brands of dumplings, when I heard someone say my name very softly. "Lauren?" I turned, and there she was. No dramatic eyeliner, no staged outfit, just jeans, a faded t-shirt with a logo from a store I knew paid about $15 an hour, and a name badge clipped to her chest. She looked older. Not in a bad way, just less glossy. There were faint lines around her eyes I didn't remember, and a tiredness in her shoulders that I recognized because I'd carried it for years. For a second, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other, both of us knowing there was a time when we would have shared a bedroom, shared clothes, shared secrets. And then there was now. She swallowed hard. "I know I'm not supposed to bother you," she said, glancing down, "but I wanted to say something, if that's okay." The restraining order had expired with her probation. She technically wasn't breaking anything by standing there. I could have walked away, and a part of me considered it. But another part, the one that had sat in therapy and unpacked every messy layer of our childhood, was curious. "You can talk," I said carefully. "I'm not promising anything, but you can talk." She nodded, eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. "I'm sorry," she said, and there was no drama in it this time, no attempt at a performance. Her voice shook on the word. "For the laptop, for the money, for the way I used you. I told myself I deserved your help because we were family, because you were doing better, and I was struggling. I made up all these stories in my head about you being selfish so I didn't have to look at what I was doing. But I know now. I know I stole from you. I know I scared you. I know I made you feel like you didn't matter unless you were fixing my life." I felt something twist in my chest at that, a mix of anger and grief and a weird, unexpected hint of relief. I wasn't interested in making it easier for her, but I also wasn't interested in pretending this conversation meant nothing. "You did," I said quietly. "You did all of that." She nodded again, a tear slipping down her cheek. She didn't wipe it dramatically, she just let it fall. "Probation sucked," she admitted with a humorless little laugh. "Community service sucked. Having to pay back every dollar sucked. But the worst part was realizing that I was never as helpless as I told everyone I was. I just didn't want to grow up because it was easier to let you be the adult for both of us." We stood there in the frozen aisle, the hum of the freezers filling the silence between her sentences. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she added quickly. "I mean, if you ever do, that would be amazing, but I get it if you can't. I just needed you to know I know what I did. And I'm trying to be different now, on my own." I took a breath, feeling the weight of every year we'd spent in our old shared bedroom, every holiday I'd missed recently, every time I'd wanted a sister and gotten a parasite instead. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally, "and I'm glad you're taking responsibility. I really am." Her eyes flicked up to mine, hopeful for half a second, then cautious again. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm not going to pretend none of it happened," I cut in gently. "It means I'm not going to go back to how things were. I'm not lending you money. I'm not signing anything. I'm not being your emergency plan. If we ever have any kind of relationship again, it's going to be small and slow, and on very clear terms. And I get to walk away the second it feels like you're slipping into old patterns. No guilt trips, no speeches about family." She flinched a little at that, but she nodded. "That's fair," she whispered. "More than fair, honestly." We didn't hug. There was no dramatic music, no instant healing. We just stood there a moment longer, two adults who had finally been forced to grow up in very different ways. And then we went back to our carts. As I walked away, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defining myself by who I was to her. Not the savior, not the bank, not the villain in her sob story. Just me. Later, when I told my therapist about it, she smiled and said, You did the hardest thing most people ever have to do. You chose yourself without needing to destroy anyone else to do it. And that, more than any court order or repossessed car, was the real revenge. Not watching Bree suffer, not getting the last word, but refusing to hand my life back to the same dynamic that almost swallowed me whole. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that family loyalty without boundaries isn't love, it's self-erasure. Saying yes until you have nothing left doesn't make you a good daughter or a good sister, it just makes you empty. The people who truly love you don't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. They learn how to build their own fire, even if it takes them longer, even if they fail a few times. So if you've got your own Bree in your life, someone who calls manipulation love and theft helping themselves, this is what I want you to hear. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect the life you worked for. Even if the people who benefited from your silence call you cruel for finally speaking up. Because at the end of the day, the real punishment isn't losing access to someone else's money, or car, or couch. The real punishment is waking up one morning and realizing the person you've been draining dry isn't willing to bleed for you anymore. And if you're the one who's been bleeding, you don't owe anyone an apology for finally deciding to heal.